prepare this message and begin to think. I've had 3 weeks. Usually I don't have 3 weeks to think on a message, but for 3 weeks thinking on this message, I remember a lot of things, and a lot of things have happened over those 3 weeks. And I'm just thankful for that. Every remembrance, Paul said, he said, I'm making requests with joy and knowing that God has started a good work. I love to see when God starts a good work in somebody, meaning they get saved. I love to see that. I love to not just see somebody saved, but I love winning people to the Lord. There's nothing like it. There's nothing like winning people to the Lord. Sometimes we can take all the credit to say it was me that stood there and gave them the gospel message and invited them to pray, and they prayed. I've had those, but I've also had those that were hardheads, sitting on the back row on the left, that it took several people to get involved in that process. But then God saves them. Then God sanctifies them. Then God fills them with the Holy Ghost, calls them to preach, and puts them in positions and puts them in places. That God just says, and he said, I'm confident of this, Paul said, that this very thing, that he that begun that work, that he will perform it until the day of Jesus Christ. To know that God started a good work in each one of you. But I just want to let somebody know, he ain't finished yet. That's not good English, but it's okay in Clay County. He ain't finished yet. He's still working and moving. I love that song that says, even when you can't see it, he's working. I told Amy yesterday, I said, even when you don't think it's happening, I'm listening. Because I repeated something she said a few months ago. I'm listening. He's always watching. He's always listening. He's always in control. And I'm thankful for that. I'm thankful that God called me into ministry. I don't know why he did, but he did. He saved me and called me. And I'm thankful for the years of evangelism and youth pastoring and associate pastor. I'm also thankful of pastoring and the ability to pastor 3 different churches, an intern pastor at another church. When I look back on each one of these pastorates, I remember some things, and really comes to mind a lot of times is the good and the bad. There's been times in my pastorates and my first church and then going to Oklahoma that we suffered some harsh treatment. But yet, through all of that harsh treatment, I found memories and cherished relationships. Even to this day, relationships created during those times. To know that we cultivated relationships with people that forever changed our lives and forever changed their lives. Still, many of them we're friends today and close today because of it. Now, don't be mistaken. Sure, I remember the harsh treatments. I can't seem to forget what one said or another did. That's the devil seems to remind us of that. I guess the flesh wants to hold on to that. I try my best to let it go, and I try to use it for a testimony and try to use it during that time to minister. But we remember those harsh treatments, of course. But more importantly than that, I remember all of the precious people that the Lord placed in my care. I'm thankful for God's family, aren't you? I'm thankful for the family of God, for every precious person that God put in my care, whether it was the people on the north side in Callahan that attended our first church or halfway across the country in Oklahoma, but God helped us cultivate relationships and to disciple people and care for them. I may not be their pastor anymore, but you know what? I remember them. I remember good times, and I also remember them, as Paul said, with joy of those memories, but also I remember them in prayer. Now, we've had our hardships here as well. But in spite of that, 7.5 years, you can imagine that 7.5 years hadn't been all joy and excitement and good times. There's been hardships. There's been things that's come our way. There's been tests and trials, decisions that had to be made and things that had to be done. But in spite of all that, I can say that I've had the privilege of pastoring most of the most wonderful people on this earth. Why don't you just look at your neighbor and say, he's talking about me. I've been able to pastor some wonderful people. And so when I think about that, I have to tell you this. As I said, I remember those that I used to pastor. I also remember you. Sometimes, especially with what we've been through this year, we begin to think out of sight, out of mind. There's been to 8 weeks, I believe it was 8 weeks, that we did not come into the sanctuary. I didn't see you 3 times a week. My dad had somebody come to him one time and told him, I'm going to start coming to your church because I went to that other church. My pastor never came and visited me. And my dad said, your pastor never came and visited? He said, no, he never came and visited. He said, well, were you at church? Were you sick? No. He never came to church. Dad said, oh, I hate to report to you, I'm not going to come and visit you either. If I see you Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night, I've already seen you 3 times a week. But we're able to come together, and when we're not able to come together and have that, and have those times of relationship, of fellowship, and to know that when you call, I can come running to you. There's been times that people called me and said, Pastor, I'm going into the hospital, just pray for me because they're not going to let you in. There's been times over that 8 weeks that I've sat in the parking lot and waited for surgery to be over. I tried to get in the door, but they wouldn't let me in. So I just take out the anointing oil and anoint them on their way in the door because that's as far as I could go with them. And so we begin to think, well, we don't come together, and we don't come together. We begin to wonder, am I forgotten about? Especially our elders at times, they'll think, are we forgotten about? But I want to assure you this morning that I remember you, that we remember you, Paul said. Even when we're not together. He said this. So what did Paul mean by that? And what does that mean to us today when he said, I remember you, and every time I think about you, I remember you in prayer? Well, that word remembered, Paul said here, first of all, he remembered them, and he said he bore them much in his thoughts, meaning he thought about them often. He thought about them when they were out of sight. He thought of them when they were at a distance. He thought of them in his mind, not just in his mind. He said, but every mention of you, he said there as often as he thought of them, he often spoke of them and delighted to hear them spoken of. And that is very important. That should be our desire towards our friends and our family and the fellowship of faith, that we should rejoice at the thought of them. We shouldn't applaud somebody's failures, but we should celebrate with them. Maybe they got the promotion over you. So what? Applaud their ability to do that and begin to thank God for them. He said the very mention of them was grateful to him. So, understand something. It should be our good pleasure to hear of the welfare of others. And I love social media, especially during times like we've been through, that you can keep up with what's going on, and you begin to wonder, I wonder how so-and-so is doing. Maybe you've not heard from them. We haven't got to come to church, and then you see a post that they say, God is good, God has blessed me, and God, and they begin to post pictures through this pandemic deal. When we were out of church, I sent out a message. I said, I would send out weekly checkups on Facebook and text. Just let me know how you doing. Do a thumbs up and a hello. And if you got them babies, post pictures, because Pastor wants to see the church babies. And those church babies are from newborns to 25. I love our children. I love our young people. And we invest in them. Paul said, I remember them. And I want to see that their welfare is good. And I want to see that they're all right. I want to know that they're doing okay. And I make sure of that because I not only check on them and hope that everything is all right, but I pray for you daily. He said, upon every mention of you and every thought of you, he said he did that. He said, I remember you. He remembered them with joy. Now, when he was at Philippi, he wasn't in a very good place. When Paul was there in Philippi, he was mistreated. He went through a lot of hardship and a lot of struggle. He was scourged. He was put into stocks and bonds. And he saw really very little fruit of his labor there. But yet he remembered Philippi with joy. Why? Because he cultivated some relationships. I believe the old statement to be true. If I reach one soul, it makes it worth it all. If I reached one, Paul's looking at the fruit of his labor and saying not much happened in Philippi, but when he writes to them, he just remembers them in joy. He looked there at his sufferings and knew it was for Christ's credit, for Christ's comfort, for that crown that he would receive someday. And every mention of that place where he suffered. We joke around our house sometimes, and I tell my family, don't say Bonifay, Florida in this house because of what we went through there in that internship. We was going down the going through the Panhandle, and Amy was driving. And I said, babe, I got to use the restroom. So next stop, pull in there, and I got to use the restroom, maybe get us something to drink. She said, next stop's Boniface. I said, keep going, I'll hold it. So we have those memories and those hardships. Maybe that's what Paul was like about Philippi. But also when I think of Boniface and I think of time spent there, I can cherish some memories of family. I posted on Facebook that particular week. Sunday morning, Mom came to the altar. Sunday night, Dad and son came to the altar. I said, it is a home improvement, family addition, that God has put a whole family back together. So we cherish memories and thoughts of walking through all of Boniface with a local pastor who's now a local pastor here, Pastor Mitch from Doctor's Inlet. He was 20 minutes away from me, and he was preaching us revival that weekend. We knocked on every door in that neighborhood, sharing with them the love of God. So in all of that, Paul said, yeah, there's some things that causes me grief, but I don't want to forget it, because in that is great joy to remember lives that were touched. So as far as being ashamed of them or loathing to hear the scene of his sufferings, he didn't do that. He remembered them with joy. There's some things that will bring us hardship. Remember, all things work together for good to those who love the Lord and are called according to his purpose. In verse 4, Paul said he remembered them in prayer. He said, always in every prayer of mine for you all. Don't think that pastor just prays for this side of the church and not this side of the church. Paul said, no, I'm praying for all of you. I'm praying for all of you. We begin to, we don't believe in having assigned seats, but it's good that you do sit in the same place because it helps me when I pray. Because I can start here and just work my way around and be able to pray for each one, each need, each situation, each circumstance. And that's what Paul said there in 1 and 4. He said that the best remembrance of those that are our friends and our family in Christ is to remember them in your prayer closet. If you wanted to remember me, don't think, well, Pastor Jamie's a good guy, great guy. I remember his hair color, his eyes. No, remember me in prayer. Remember me when you go into the prayer closet. Also remember me when you make peach cobbler or blondies or fruit salad. But remember me mostly in prayer when you go before the throne of grace. Because I can assure you, if you think nobody ever prays for me, I can guarantee you without a shadow of a doubt, when I stand before you today, I can tell you your name is called out at least once every day. Because I call it out in prayer. And that's what Paul was saying. He said, I want to give you this guarantee. You're being prayed for because I remember you in prayer. Because that's the best thing we can do for anybody. Have you ever just had a contact with somebody and their situation was so bad and they begin to share it when your heart broke for them? And your heart broke worse because you couldn't do anything about the situation? Amy told me a long time ago, she said, babe, you got to work some things out or you're going to stress yourself to no end. You can't fix everybody's problems. And sometimes that I've learned from Amy that she don't want me to fix it. She just wants me to hear what she's saying. Because as soon as she starts talking, I'm thinking of the resolve. But I can't fix it. And it's the same way when we're ministering to others, when we're ministering to those in the congregation that they call us or we're sitting there with them at the hospital or whatever the case may be. They've just lost a loved one and we're wanting to give some level of comfort. And I have found that it does not matter what I say. When somebody's lost a loved one, there's no words that's going to make that any better. And there's just many times, there's some of you that I've been there with you in those final moments of your loved one's life. And I didn't have a lot of words for you, but I would just put my hand on your shoulder, on your back, or take your hand, because there's no words that I can say. I can tell you I know how you feel because I've been there. I've suffered loss, but I'll never tell you I know how you feel if I've never been there. And there's been times that I could say, I know how you feel, I'll be praying for you, but there's other times that I say, I don't have any clue what you're going through, but I'm going to remember you in prayer. So even when we can't do anything about it, there's something we can do about it. The effectual, fervent prayer of a righteous man still avails much. So I think it's important, Sister Gilda, that I stay righteous in the sight of God, that I can avail much in prayer for the congregation, for my family, and for all those that we come in contact with, and the same for you and I. Paul is saying, I remember you in prayer. Much in prayer for his friends, for all of his friends. And for these he was writing to in particular. It seemed that it was a matter of expression that he mentioned them at the throne of grace. Several churches, though, he was just writing to Philippi here, but he was remembering the Galatians, the Ephesians. Everybody that he wrote letters to in all of his travels, he was praying for them. He had seasons of prayer, though, just specifically for Philippi. And he let them know that. I remember you in prayer. And then he said, number 5, he said, I thank God upon every joyful remembrance of them. We've got to have that in our prayer lives. We've got to have that in our lives, period. Thanksgiving. It's not just a holiday in November. Thanksgiving should be a part of our heart. And that's what Paul had for these people. It was a part of every prayer and every manner of rejoicing and every manner of thanksgiving that he had for them. He had comfort of them. He had comfort in knowing that God must receive the glory in their lives. And so he thanked God, as well as making those requests of joy. He thanked God for them. He thanked God for what God was doing in their lives. He thanked God that they were surrendered to the will of God and allowing God to work in their lives. So many people don't see the hand of God in their lives because they don't want the hand of God working in their lives. But Paul said, I'm thankful that you chose to surrender completely to God. And every pastor should resound that statement and that thought of Paul, saying, I thank God that God has receiving glory in your life. I thank God that you're lifting him up and that you're allowing him to be glorified. And then he said, I thank God upon every remembrance of you. We must do that. We must thank God for others. Some people think that they live on an island, they don't need anybody. They can make it all on their own. That don't work out too good. Of course, it's a lonely place, but it's a terrible place. It's not a place of healthiness. We need one another. And so we need to realize that and understand that. Not only do we need one another, not only can I not stand by myself, you don't have to stand on your own. You don't have to isolate and pull yourself away from everybody else. And so Paul is letting them know that I thank God upon every remembrance of you, and I thank God for others. I thank God that I'm a part of the family of God. I'm thankful that I have someone that I can say, hey, church, pray for me. That we have a place of refuge that we can come to, that we can come together. How good and how pleasant it is for brethren to dwell together in unity and to be able to come together. And Paul said, I, for one, am thankful for that. I'm thankful for the comfort that I have in that, the gifts that come from that, the usefulness of that, receiving the benefit of that. We've got to understand many people don't attend church because they don't see the usefulness and the benefits of coming to the house of God. I have found it to be beneficial to come to the house of God. Can I tell you this morning, I'd be here even if I wasn't a pastor because I have found it useful to come to the house of God. I have been at the bottom of the barrel and thought it was all over. But as the psalmist said, I thought it was all over until I came into the house of the Lord. It was in the house of the Lord that I met my wife. It was in the house of the Lord that God restored our marriage. It was in the house of the Lord that I've seen miracles take place. It's because of the house of the Lord that I've got to meet all of you. There's something useful about coming into his house and about having friends and family in the faith. He said, this is that matter of thanksgiving. He said, I give thanks to God for the comfort that I have in you, for the fellowship in the gospel from the first day until now. Understand something, fellowship, gospel fellowship is the best fellowship there is. There's nothing like it, nothing like coming together. We like hanging out with friends, doing different things, going different places. Oh, but there's nothing like gospel fellowship, coming together with a household of faith. Those who we sincerely receive and embrace the gospel together. He said, we've been doing this since the very first day until now, and I'm thankful for it. And in those two words, he said there, from the very first day until now. Understand that as pastors and ministers, we get great comfort when people begin well, but also when you hold on. Remember what I told you, that sometimes faith is just holding on? When you just hold on. when you persevere, when you begin to go through some things, but you don't give up. As we prayed for many lined up across here last week saying, I'm going through a storm. But you can say this morning, you may say, I'm still in the storm, but I'm still hanging on. You're here this morning because you hung on another week. You persevered. You pushed through it. You didn't give up on God. You didn't give up on church. You didn't give up on the message that's going to come from the pulpit through a sermon or a song today. You came with an expectation that God is going to move and help you through it. And so until now, we've got to keep that until now working in our lives. Know that God did something in the beginning, but He's still working. He's still moving. It's great comfort to us to know that. And we begin to compare this to Paul's thanksgiving on the action of other churches. It rather seems it was taken more general for the fellowship where they had in faith and hope and love. But he said this is all for all good Christians. A fellowship in gospel. You know what a fellowship in gospel does? It has promises, it has ordinances, it has privileges, it has hopes. And he said, from this day until now. Verse 3 of Amazing Grace said that grace brought me this far, till now. But understand something, that now is going to be the same grace that keeps me all the way home. Until it's kept me until now. So if it's kept me until now, I have confidence it's going to keep me until He comes again. Now, it's very important that we hold fast the profession of our faith without wavering. And then in verse 6, Paul uses this word, confidence. Confidence. For the confidence he had concerning them, he said, being confident of this very thing. This confidence that he had, it brought great comfort to him. And it should bring great comfort to every minister, every pastor. As I begin to reach out to the preachers within our congregation to preach these Sunday night services, some of them said to me, I appreciate the confidence that you have to give me this opportunity. Young preachers that we've allowed, and older preachers even, that we've allowed to and felt led to bring in to preach, that statement's made. I appreciate the confidence that you have in me to do this. I appreciate the confidence that you have that you asked me to sing, or the confidence that you asked me to be on the platform, or the confidence that you had me to teach, or the confidence that you had to ask me for prayer. That's very important. The confidence of Christians bring great comfort, and we got to give thanks for that. Not only for what we have, but for what we have the future prospect of. And that's wonderful this morning. I'm thankful for you just the way you are today, but I love you too much to let you sit there and stay that way. Have a confidence that God wants to do something greater in you. I don't want anybody to be saved and satisfied. As I said last week, as the Spirit of the Lord was moving, I don't want anybody to sit back and be a spectator and just watch. It says reach out. Song says reach out and touch the Lord as He goes by. Not look out and watch Him as He goes by. And see, well, surely the presence of the Lord was in this place. One man said that. I believe it was Jacob that said, surely the Lord was in this place and I knew it not. It was too late. He had already passed by and he had missed it. I don't want that for you. I want you to realize that when God is moving, that you can take hold of that you can embrace that you can pull it in and have confidence to know that the God that began a good work in you is going to continue to do that good work. And knowing that we continue in that faith. So Paul speaks here with much confidence concerning their estate, hoping well concerning them when the judgment comes, in charity and being confident in the judgment of faith that they were sincere and that they would be happy. He said that he wanted them to know that He who has begun a good work in you will perform it. Look at somebody and tell them, God will do it. He will perform it unto the day of Jesus Christ. What will He perform? A good work among you. God's up to good. The devil's up to nothing but bad. There's a lot of people that's up to nothing but bad right now. There's a lot of bad going on in our world today. But God has not changed. He's still up to good. It's still His good pleasure to give you the kingdom. You're still the apple of His eye. He still loves you. He still caring for you. He still wants to do a good work in your family, in your home, in our church. Understand the devil wants us to think it's all gloom and doom. If you listen to the media, they want you to think, well, you might as well just end it all. It ain't worth going another day. But that's not the case. It gets sweeter as the days go by. There is nothing better than serving the Lord. There is nothing better than coming to church 3 times a week and every night in revival and twice a day in camp meeting. Why? Because I get to come together with the family of God, people of like faith, that I have confidence, just as much confidence that God is working in my life, that God is working in your life. And I'm thinking of Nehemiah when he began to take the me and change it to we. Even in the good times, we can say God has been good to us, and we have been blessed. But also I stand upon that foundation to know, church family, when you're going through something, once again, don't think I'm going through it by myself, because when you reach out to this pastor or somebody within this congregation, I have the confidence that they're going to say, I see, and that I'm going to say, I hear and know the distress that we are in, because your problem becomes our problem, and we begin to bind together in agreement and know that I believe that God's going to make a way for me. If I live a holy life, shun the wrong and do what's right, I still believe that He will make a way in all good works, and you will prevail. He said Christ will have a church. He will have a church. Regardless of what they try to do, the gates of hell will not prevail against the church. So when we allow someone or something to get a hold of our heart, we'll always remember them. When we think of remembering, it's up here. But unfortunately, I forget a lot up here. I'll walk into a room and forget what I walked into the room for. I told you last week I got some timers. So, might not remember. You may come to me, just 7.5 years of being here, you may come to me and say, Pastor, you remember such and such day when we did this? And if I'm honest, I say, I don't remember that particular situation. But when I've got you beyond the thoughts, there's some things that gets down in our heart. And when they get in our heart, we may not remember every little detail of every encounter, but we remember that person. We remember that situation. There's a story. I was reading a book this week and came across this story, and I added this to my message yesterday. I want to share this with you. It's a sad story. I'll go ahead and tell you that up front, but it just really ties into what we're saying this morning. It's a story of a doctor who was doing a seminar for other doctors, and a psychiatrist shared this story. She said that she had a patient that came in, and it was an 8-year-old girl. And this 8-year-old girl was a recipient of a heart transplant. And the donor was a 10-year-old who was also a girl. The donor had unfortunately been raped and murdered. The mother of the 8-year-old became concerned for her daughter when she began to tell of dreams she was having. So the mother took her to the psychiatrist, who listened, and after they listened, they both agreed and decided they needed to report these dreams to the police. So based on the 8-year-old girl and what she told the police, they arrested the neighbor of the 10-year-old girl. They arrested the neighbor. And we already said what happened to her, so I won't repeat that. The 8-year-old had described in detail what the house was like, where it occurred, what the room looked like, what the conversation was between her and the one that did it, and was so conclusive and so correct that the neighbor was convicted. Now consider this, an 8-year-old recipient of a heart of a 10-year-old could recount in every detail of that awful situation and how it occurred. How is that? The heart knew it. The heart knew it. The heart was still living. The heart kept pumping, and the heart knew it. The body and the brain of that donor was gone, but the heart lived because it was transplanted into another. And that transplanted heart also transplanted the memory of what was taking place, and it was retained in that heart. Justice was brought to that situation. Now, I understand that's a sad story, but it shows us that we must guard our heart. It shows us that once something reaches your heart, it's often remembered. I've said this many times about listening to music, that we've got to be careful of the music that we listen to. When something gets so deep in you that it causes your foot to tap, you know it's in you. So you need to be careful what your foot's tapping to. You need to be careful what you put before your eyes. You can be careful because there's a lot of things, just a fleeting thought, a passing thought, and understand something, that the devil can put thoughts in your mind, but we have a guard upon that heart. But when things begin to get in that heart, they're there. The mind may be gone, the body may be gone, but the heart is still there. I've ministered to people in nursing homes on many occasions, and Sister Gilda as well, I'm sure, playing music there. People, their mind is gone. Dementia, Alzheimer's. They don't even know their spouse's names anymore. But you begin to sing Amazing Grace, and they sing every word. You begin to, I was ministering in a nursing home in McClenny, and I began to quote a scripture, and they would finish it. They knew the Bible. They knew the Word of God. Why? Because it got down in their heart. It got down in their heart. And so understand something, that we may not always remember up here, but what reaches our heart is often remembered. And so I shared that story and shared all of this to tell you this morning, you're much further than the mind of this pastor. You're much further than on my mind. You're in my heart. I may go brain dead one day. Amy may think that I already am, but maybe brain dead, maybe gone. But wouldn't it be amazing? Wouldn't this be amazing? That something happened and I pass away and I'm an organ donor and they take this heart out of me and they give it to someone else. And you may think that one says, well, Pastor said that I'm prayed for every day because he calls my name in prayer. I guess now that he's gone, my name will never be called in prayer again. But that heart is put in the chest of another believer. And that believer, for some reason, never seen your face, never heard your name. But all of a sudden, he's there in prayer, and your name comes to his remembrance, to his heart. And he begins to pray and begins to call on the Lord in your behalf. I believe that's possible because it gets into the heart. The psychologists proved it, the doctors proved it, the police proved it in this case. But understand something. I might not remember every encounter, as I said before, but understand this. I often remember what each of you mean to me, and I'm thankful for that this morning. So I just wanted to assure you today, I've been trying to assure you for 3 weeks now, but assure you that each one of you are not just in the mind of this pastor, but you're in my heart. Whether I've known you for 20-something years, whether we just met 7.5 years when I came here as pastor, or whether I just met you when you started attending this church, when you came into my life, you came into my heart. And as Paul said, I remember you in prayer. I remember you in my thoughts. I think of you. I think of your welfare and your well-being often. That's important. That's important for someone to know because there's a lot of people that think nobody cares. Paul wasn't just writing this letter to write this letter. There's a lot of things that I could have preached today and could have preached over these last few weeks. But I thought it important in this time that we're living in, when we're living in this time of uncertainty during this unprecedented season that we're living in, when everything just seems to be chaotic and we want to do over for 2020 and all of that, that you understand something. I want each of you to know what our text said this morning. In closing, I thank my God upon every remembrance of you. I thank our God upon every remembrance of you. Will you stand with me this morning? I'm thankful to the Lord for you. I'm thankful to the Lord that we have a church family. I think of that song, says, I'm so glad I'm a part of the family of God. And if you feel that way this morning, whether it's your spouse or somebody else there close to you, within earshot of you, why don't you just look at them and say, I thank God for you. Don't say it if you don't mean it. Find somebody that you mean it. Say it to them. And that one that you don't mean it, you need to get that under the blood so you can look at them and say it. I don't believe that anybody could look at anybody and turn the other way this morning, because I believe that we truly have confidence to believe that I am thankful for you. that we're thankful for one another. I'm thankful that we're able to be here today. I'm thankful that you chose to be here today. I'm thankful that you love God, that God is doing a work in your life. I'm thankful that you're saved, that you're pursuing a closer walk with God. Thankful to hear testimonies. Man, it just blessed my heart when I grabbed Paul by the arms last week and said, "You got filled with the Holy Ghost yet?" "Yep." That just blessed me. Just bubbled over within me. When Sister Stone shared a testimony several months ago, Brother Stone, had been praying for him to be filled with the Holy Ghost for years. And Brother Stone, Sister Stone shared that testimony of how in the middle of the night, he sat up on his bedside, began to speak in other tongues. The Spirit gave the utterance. Mary looked over at him, about to tell him, "Get back in bed." But then she realized what was going on. She said, "Carry on." He began to walk around that room. When she told me that, I had tears in my eyes because I remember praying for Brother Stone years ago, and I always said, "What do you want, Brother Stone?" "Everything the Lord has for me." So I knew how to pray for Brother Stone. "Lord, give him everything that you have for him." I want for you what you want of God for you. I want God's best for you. And I want to make sure that you are wanting the right thing. He said He'd give us the desires of our heart. But we need to make sure desires of our heart according to His will, His way, His purpose, and His plan. So church, I thank God for you. I thank God for you. Can we just lift our hands this morning in closing? If you want to make your way around these altars, you can, or just right where you're at. Just lift your hands and begin to thank God for those things that are precious to you this morning. Begin to thank God. I think I'd start first with my salvation. Just thank Him for that. If you're not saved this morning, you can be saved. Say, "Lord, come into my heart. Forgive me of my sins. Wash me. Make me clean." And then you can thank Him for your salvation. Thank Him for those things that are precious to you. You know what they are. Let's just take a few moments and do that this morning.